Welcome to this introduction for the Vocabulary Builder series. What I'm going to do is launch a new set of modules completely focused on building your vocabulary. At the moment, what we have is a lot of raw structure, meaning we have different verb tenses, pronouns, bits and pieces of glue, and concepts in Spanish. So what we need to do is now decorate that raw structure with vocabulary, but not just any kind of vocabulary. It needs to be high frequency vocabulary. In this way, we're going to activate this raw structure that we've built and develop it into genuine conversational fluency. It's important to realize that you won't see results right away. It's only when you go through hundreds of these texts that over time you'll start to notice a change in your Spanish. That's because you'll be coming across the same words, the same structures, verbs, the same combinations of pronouns, the same types of glue. These things are going to repeat themselves over and over again. And this is where the real power lies, because what that effectively means is that you'll be learning the same core lessons over and over again until it really sinks in and becomes a natural part of your Spanish. So, in the beginning, expect it to be slow, but the more of these texts that you work through, the more momentum you'll start to pick up. And that's a key word there, momentum. Your Spanish will really start to accelerate into conversational proficiency. The method that will follow is to first look at the Spanish text itself, and we'll compare it to the English translation. From there, what we want to do is grab as much vocabulary and glue as we can. It's kind of like picking fruit from a tree. From there, you're going to make a list of that vocabulary and that glue, and you're going to learn it. Then you'll go back and test yourself, this time looking at the English side of the text and trying to translate it back into Spanish. And this is something we'll do and repeat on a regular basis. As we do this, one thing you'll soon discover is that having verbs and structure and concepts gives you a lot, but it doesn't give you everything. Because there's a lot of little moving pieces, little moving parts in Spanish. Little things like a, de, en, and se. There are also a lot of common phrases and sayings that are different in Spanish in small ways. For example, in English we'll say, "I'll see you at the party," whereas in Spanish it's more common to hear, "I'll see you in the party." These are the types of fidgety little bits that will catch you out. It's like looking inside of a watch where there's lots of little moving parts that really have no literal translation into English. Now, this is most likely where you'll make the majority of your mistakes, and that's completely normal. The good news is that you'll still be perfectly understood. It's just that the more Spanish text that you're exposed to, the more you try to translate and to do, the less of these kinds of mistakes you'll make. As I mentioned before, it's all about doing lots of these little texts over time. Here we are inside of Vocabulary Builder 1. This is the PDF that I would like you to download. You can see in blue we have the Spanish text, and below that we have a direct translation in English. So let's go through this first one here and see what kind of useful phrases and vocabulary we can extract from it. The first line reads, "La vida puede ser difícil cuando eres un adolescente." Spanish loves to use the definite article, meaning the word the, much more than we do in English. So whereas English will have life can be difficult, Spanish will say the life can be difficult. And you'll see this happening a lot throughout the text. Next up, notice that it went with ser instead of estar. If we were to say in the present tense, it's difficult, it would be es difícil. So right away, you know that you're coming down on the side of ser. It's used again here with eres, because being a teenager or an adult or a child belongs to your identity. Vocabulary-wise, here we have the word for teenager, adolescent, adolescente. In the next line we have tienes que soportar mucha presión social de tus amigos en la escuela. This verb here, soportar, is very useful because it can mean, as we see here, to deal with, or it can mean to endure or to put up with. So it's very versatile. And then we have the word for peer pressure, presión social. This is feminine, being an ION word, so we have la presión social, which is why we're having mucha to match it. Next up we have this word encima, which is really useful because it means on top of that. You can see again here in the English translation. So it's a very nice piece of glue. It continues with tus padres pueden ser imposibles porque están en una etapa donde creen que todavía son jóvenes. Notice that here we switched into estar with están because we're saying that they're in a stage. So this in a way is describing a location where they are. Están en una etapa. Another nice piece of glue is this word aunque, meaning even though. En realidad tienen más de 40 años y son realmente viejos. The translation here is even though in reality they have more than 40 years, meaning they're more or over 40 years old and are really old. Here we're obviously speaking from the viewpoint of a teenager. Next we come to this expression sin embargo. Now normally you'll see this described as however, but it can also be used for nevertheless. So we're right here in the translation. Sin embargo, están determinados creer que son jóvenes y a veces es embarazoso. Whenever you see examples of ser or estar being used, try to decide why the text is going with one rather than the other. There's always a reason. In this instance, we're saying they're determined to believe that they're young, and sometimes it's embarrassing. Now, we're not saying that they're determined all the time in everything. We're just saying that on this particular issue, they're determined to believe that. And so this is why it went with están. At the end here, we have the word for embarrassing, embarazoso. But you'll also hear or come across the word penoso. They are interchangeable, both mean embarrassing. So let's highlight that as another piece of potential vocabulary for our list. In the final sentence, we have this word incluso, which is very, very useful. It's used, well, let's have a look at the translation. It's even more embarrassing. This word even in that sense in Spanish is incluso, so it's even more embarrassing. Es incluso más embarazoso. Cuando se comportan así en frente de tus amigos. So it's even more embarrassing when they behave in this way in front of your friends. So the verb comportarse means to behave, and here you can see it's reflexive. They behave themselves, se comportan, like this. And then we have in front of, enfrente de. So here we have another nice piece of glue. Continuing down, we have como adolescente. Notice that in English we would say as a teenager, but in Spanish they simply say as teenager. Here you can see one of those fidgety little bits where there isn't a direct translation between Spanish and English. So we have como adolescente. De repente descubres que la vida no es justa. Here again we see the definite article being used, que la vida. And we have this word here, de repente, means suddenly. It doesn't quite match with the English translation because we have you soon find out. But for me, the most natural way to say this in Spanish is that de repente descubres, you suddenly discover that life isn't fair. So justa is the word for fair. Notice this next phrase here, te toca soportar. Te toca means it's your turn. So it's your turn to endure unjust punishments. Punishments is castigos, and injustos would be unjust or unfair. So here we have more vocabulary with castigos. It continues with y no solo por cosas que hayas hecho. Here we have a gap in our Spanish, this is actually the past subjunctive, and we've only done the present subjunctive. So this is something that or a gap we will have to fill. The meaning here would be, and not just for things that you might have done, but also for things that definitely you haven't done. So, y no solo por cosas que hayas hecho, pero también por cosas que definitivamente no has hecho. It's quite a mouthful, that word, definitivamente, that definitely you haven't done. This next phrase is also worth adding to your list, por si no fuera bastante, meaning as if it wasn't enough. Instead of bastante, you'll also hear poco, so either way is correct. It goes on with también tienes que aguantar. Aguantar, again, is similar to soportar. They're almost interchangeable, meaning that you have to put up with. A tus hermanos pequeños, your younger brothers and sisters, y sus tonterías. Tonterías means their nonsense or their silly behavior, their silliness. We then have pasan su tiempo tratando de encontrar la manera de fastidiarte. So they spend their time trying to find ways to annoy you. Fastidiar is to annoy. So to annoy you, fastidiarte. Notice that in English we will say to find ways to pester you or to annoy you. Whereas in Spanish, the literal translation is they spend their time trying to find the way to annoy you. You see the little difference there again? This is what I mean by bits and pieces of moving parts in Spanish, and where we tend to make the majority of our mistakes. Finally, we have dejarte en ridículo. So this means to make a fool of you, to leave you in ridicule. Dejarte en ridículo en frente de tus amigos. So in front of your friends. And this verb is nice. Estropear. This means to mess up. You can see it down here. And mess up your life. Y estropear tu vida. So what I've done here is given you an example of how we would take things from this text, bits of glue, phrases, and vocabulary. Now, your list will be unique to you because remember, you are taking what you feel will help your Spanish or help to push it forward. And for someone else who may be at a different level of Spanish than you in terms of vocabulary, they will have or extract a different list from this. So it's completely personal what you decide to take from these texts. From this, you should make a list, for example, like this one, where I've just extracted the useful bits from the first paragraph that I think will help to push my Spanish forward, things that I need to add into my Spanish. And this is the list that you will learn. Now, once you have done that, you'll come back and go in to only the English side, and you will try to translate this back into Spanish. Now that we've been through the Spanish text and extracted vocabulary and pieces of glue from it, created our list and learned it, the final step is to go back into the English version and to try to translate this back into Spanish. Now, the way I would like you to do this is slowly, but with a lot of confidence. For example, this is the pace you should be aiming for. La vida puede ser difícil cuando eres un adolescente. Tienes que soportar mucha presión social de tus amigos en la escuela y encima tus padres pueden ser imposibles porque están en una etapa donde creen que todavía son jóvenes, aunque en realidad tienen más de 40 años y son realmente viejos. Sin embargo, están determinados a creer que son jóvenes y a veces es embarazoso. Es incluso más embarazoso cuando se comportan así en frente de tus amigos. Notice that I took my time and I didn't rush. What I said with confidence. And this is how I would like you to translate these passages. Let's have a look at text number 2. It begins with La llegada de mi mamá fue muy traumática para mí. The arrival is what we have here, la llegada, and you can see how this is related or comes from the verb llegar, to arrive. Then we have fue instead of era for the word was. Remember that we always have 4 choices for the word was. Now this is an event, so this is why it goes with fue instead of era. And then we have the word traumática, ending in a to match what it's describing. So the arrival, la llegada, was traumatic. Traumática para mí. So let's take this word as well as some vocabulary that we could add to our list. Then we have somehow I knew that I had to get through it. This is this sentence here. So somehow is a great piece of glue. De alguna manera, somehow. Then we have sabía, I knew. Then we have tenía que, for I had to. So this is matching as well, keeping the line going. Sabía que, tenía que. See, it's all one line. I knew that I had to. And then the verb superar. This is another useful one because it means to overcome or to get through something. And it's ending in la because we're still talking about la llegada all the way back here. So I knew that I had to get through it. This is where the la is coming from. In the next line we have tenía que hacerlo soportable. If you wanted, I suppose you could also say tuve que hacerlo soportable. Either way there would be correct. Basically you're saying I had to make it bearable. So from the beginning, somehow I knew that I had to get through it. I had to make it bearable. We might also choose this word and add it into our list. Soportable, bearable. Now we have si no fuera. This also came up in text number 1. But in this case we have si no fuera por el apoyo. If it wasn't for the support of my husband. And actually we could split that up. So we have si no fuera por. This is the piece of glue. If it wasn't for, and then we have the word for support, el apoyo, de mi esposo. If it wasn't for the support of my husband, no creo que pudiera haberlo hecho. Here we have another gap in our Spanish. This again relates to the past subjunctive. So what it's saying is, I don't think I could have been able to do it. If it wasn't for the support of my husband, I don't think that I might have been able to do it. Something like that. This pudiera belongs to the past subjunctive. Now we have a little variation. De alguna forma. This also means somehow. You can see we have de alguna manera or de alguna forma. Either way, both will stand for somehow. Encontré una manera de ignorar sus comentarios negativos. So this is, I found a way to ignore her negative comments. Something I'll draw your attention to here is this bit, una manera. You could also say, I found the way to ignore, and that would actually sound a little bit more natural in Spanish. This way is more related to how we would express it in English. I found a way, encontré una manera. But native speakers would probably go with encontré la manera de ignorar. And actually you can see this in action in the first text. If we scroll up and we try to find it, here it is. Pasan su tiempo tratando de encontrar la manera instead of una manera. Now you would be understood and it's not quite a mistake, but it's just a little bit more natural to say the way instead of our way as we would in English. Then we have the verb ignorar, to ignore, and then comments would be comentarios negativos, negative comments. Now we have another piece of glue, el hecho de que, the fact, or more specifically, the fact that. Notice that they stick in de here, el hecho de que. Cualquier cosa, this means anything, cualquier cosa. No importa que tan pequeña sea. Here you can see the little subjunctive being used here. So it's saying that the fact that anything, regardless, or it doesn't matter how small it might be. Que tan pequeña sea. It could annoy her. Puede molestarla. Here we have the verb to annoy, molestar, or to bother. Básicamente, no noté ninguna diferencia en ella en comparación con antes. So we have basically, básicamente, I didn't notice, no noté, ninguna diferencia, any difference, ninguna diferencia in her and ella, in comparison with before. Now in English, we would simply say, I didn't notice any difference in her from before. And so if you were to say desde antes, do a literal translation there, that would sound wrong in Spanish. Instead, the correct way is to extend it out. So in comparison with before, en comparación con antes. So this again is a noun, the comparison, comparación. We have finally, I tried my best, but even all of that didn't make any difference. So I tried my best. Hice lo mejor que pude. Notice that the structure is different. In Spanish, they will say, I did the best that I could. Hice lo mejor que pude. Whereas in English, we would simply say, I tried my best. So the Spanish is a little bit more extended. Now we have something else from before cropping up again. Incluso. But even all of that, pero incluso todo eso, no hizo ninguna diferencia. It didn't make any difference. Ninguna diferencia. Also repeating here. The bullet points below here are giving you different options for this final phrase. You'll find that there's almost always different or multiple ways that you can express the same thing in any language. So this is just an example of other ways that we could also phrase this last sentence here. Now, just as before, I would like you to create your own vocabulary list from this text, learn it, and then come back to the test and see if you can translate back into Spanish. Now let's test ourselves by trying to translate from English back into the Spanish. La llegada de mi mamá fue muy traumática para mí. De alguna manera, sabía que tenía que superarla. Tenía que hacerlo soportable. Si no fuera por el apoyo de mi esposo, no creo que pudiera haberlo hecho. De alguna forma, encontré una manera de ignorar sus comentarios negativos y el hecho de que cualquier cosa, no importa que tan pequeña sea, puede molestarla. Básicamente, no noté ninguna diferencia en ella en comparación con antes. Hice lo mejor que pude, pero incluso todo eso no hizo ninguna diferencia. Let's take a look at what we could extract from text number 3. It starts with, está bien, no te preocupes. This is a very useful phrase, meaning don't worry about it. No te preocupes. The verb preocupar is to be preoccupied. So this is, don't preoccupy yourself. This is how you would express, don't worry about it. Then we have, en lugar de eso, tengo algunas buenas ideas que podemos intentar. This phrase here is how you would express instead, in place of that. Notice that in English we have it at the end of the sentence, but it sounds much more natural to put it up front in Spanish. You could also say en su lugar, in its place. We have some good ideas, algunas buenas ideas, or matching, que podemos intentar, that we could try. Next up we have, acabo de comprar un manual que va a ayudarnos a repararlo. So I've just bought, acabo de comprar. We've always done or already done a module on that. Here we have the word which is very similar for a manual, manual. It's just the pronunciation that changes. That's going to help us to fix it. Then we have está lleno de consejos buenos. Normally in Spanish, advice is plural, so it's saying it's full of good advices. Consejos buenos. I also like this one. Algo parecido a. Something similar to. Algo parecido a lo que teníamos antes, pero mejor. So something similar to what we had before, but better or only better. Sé que nuestros invitados. This is, I know that our guests are going to appreciate it. Van a apreciarlo cuando lleguen más tarde. Here we have the present subjunctive. Because as we know, after the word cuando, if the action is not habitual or normal behavior, then you will go into the subjunctive form of the verb. This is why we have lleguen instead of llegan. So just as before, take what you need from it, and then you can come back and try to translate the English back into Spanish. Let's try to do that now. Está bien, no te preocupes. En lugar de eso, tengo algunas buenas ideas que podemos intentar. Acabo de comprar un manual que va a ayudarnos a repararlo. Está lleno de consejos buenos. Algo parecido a lo que teníamos antes, solo mejor. Sé que nuestros invitados van a apreciarlo cuando lleguen más tarde. In text number 4 we have hay un niño que se sienta justo atrás de mí en la clase. The interesting word here is actually this one, justo, because in English we have there's a boy who sits right behind me. This is how we would express that word right, justo atrás de mí en la clase. Se llama Alex y es mi archienemigo, my arch enemy. If this was a female or a girl we were talking about, the word would change to archienemiga. Next we have creer, but used reflexively. So it's saying he believes himself. And Spanish extends that even further. He believes himself to be. So all of that in English is se cree. In Spanish, he believes or she believes herself to be se cree. La última Coca-Cola en el desierto, in the desert. This is a saying in Spanish, the last Coca-Cola in the desert. Next we have a todas las chicas, to all the girls. To them he is pleasing. So to them is les and he is pleasing gusta. A todas las chicas les gusta. Solo porque sus padres son ricos, his parents are rich. Una vez en el área de juegos. So once is una vez, one time. And then we have in the playground would be área de juegos. Soltó la cuerda mientras yo estaba subiéndola. This is coming from the verb soltar, which means to let go or to let go of. When he let go of the rope, soltó la cuerda mientras yo estaba subiéndola, while I was climbing it. Notice that we have la because we're referring to la cuerda, and we have an accent over here which makes the word look a little strange at first, just because we're adding on the pronoun here. So we have subiéndola. That's where the stress is falling. So there you might pick out, say, the verb soltar, to let go of, and also cuerda for rope. Now we have me caí al suelo. I fell to the ground, to the floor. Y me lastimé, and I hurt myself. Lastimar is to hurt or to wound, to injure. So me lastimé, I hurt myself. Now to pay attention in Spanish is to put attention. They will say poner atención. So we have nunca pone atención. He never pays attention in class, in la clase. Notice how we have the definite article here again. You'll see this cropping up all the time. Whereas in English we'd say he never pays attention in class. Whereas Spanish will say he never pays attention in the class. Todo lo que logra es molestar a todos con sus tonterías. Here we have that verb Tonterías again, his silliness or his stupid behavior, his nonsense. This is the personal a because we have is to annoy, molestar a todos, to annoy everyone with his nonsense. Also, notice here that in English we say all he does is annoy everyone, but in Spanish would be all that he achieves is to annoy everyone, because lograr is to achieve. So todo lo que logra, all that he achieves is to annoy everyone with his nonsense. Let's try to translate it now. Hay un niño que se sienta justo atrás de mí en la clase. Se llama Alex y es mi archienemigo. Se cree la última Coca-Cola en el desierto. A todas las chicas les gusta, solo porque sus padres son ricos. Una vez en el área de juegos, soltó la cuerda mientras yo estaba subiéndola y me caí al suelo y me lastimé. Nunca pone atención en la clase. Todo lo que logra es molestar a todos con sus tonterías. Let's look at text number 5. Le dije que tengo cosas más importantes en las que pensar hoy. For me, the most interesting thing here is this little piece of glue en las que. This is expressing in which to think about today. Now in English, we don't have to put it in. We could if we wanted to, but it's optional. And very often in Spanish, it's not. Whenever in which is said or implied in English, you're going to use this little structure here in Spanish. Now this could be en las que, en los que, en lo que, or en la que, depending on what you're referring to. Here we're referring to cosas, many things to think about. So in which becomes en las que. This is where the las is coming from, the fact that we are referring to things, cosas, which is feminine and plural. We'll do a dedicated lesson on this to explain it properly later on in level 9. Next we have que simplemente no puedo permitirme perder más tiempo. If we look at the English, it's saying I simply can't afford to lose more time. But in Spanish, it would be better put as I simply can't allow myself to lose more time, because permitir is to allow, and we have allow myself, permitirme. Next up, we have a sentence which is quite complex in its structure. It says, le pregunté si podía pedirle a Juan. Okay, so there's a lot in this little phrase here. First of all, to her I asked, le pregunté. Now, because we went with pregunté, we have to continue in the past for could. So we have pregunté and podía, rather than podría. That's what you might be tempted to say. So I asked her if she could. Okay, so it's not le pregunté si podría pedirle a Juan, but podía. It went into the past. Now this is something that we don't do in English, but it's forced in Spanish because we went with pregunté. So we had to put podía instead of podría. This again, I think, is a little gap in our Spanish which we're going to need to fill. With pedirle, we have the redundant le. Ask to him, to Juan, right? We're already saying who we're asking, but we put in the le anyway. Now it continues with si podría venir a mi departamento más tarde porque tengo un regalo. Now you can use para darle or que darle. Either one is correct. Another thing is that in Latin America, they use the word departamento, but in Spain, you can use apartamento, just like it would be in English. This next phrase is also nice. It occurred to me. Se me ocurrió. If you can roll your R here, it's good, but if you can't, don't worry about it too much. You'll still be understood. So it occurred to me. Se me ocurrió que hay ocasiones. Now here you can see the in which, en las que, in which it's necessary to be kind with those who have helped you throughout the year or during the year. Now, I've put two options here. We have hay ocasiones. So we have las ocasiones. Now, if you said that, you would go en las que to match it. But you could also say, se me ocurrió que hay momentos en los que. You see how it changed because momentos is los momentos. So therefore, in which went to en los que. Then we have es necesario ser amable con aquellos que te han ayudado durante el año. So it means in which it's necessary to be kind with those, con aquellos. This is a word we haven't seen before in the course. With those, con aquellos, that have helped you, que te han ayudado durante el año. Notice in Spanish they would simply say during the year, whereas in English we would go with well, during or throughout the year. Then we have y él era muy bueno conmigo cuando necesitaba ayuda. So, and he was very good to me when I was needing help. Finally, we have tenía que afrontar muchas dificultades inesperadas. So there's some nice vocabulary here. To face is afrontar, to face up to, right? Afrontar. And then in English, we have many unexpected obstacles. Now, it sounds much better in Spanish to say difficulties. So we have muchas dificultades, and then the word for unexpected would be inesperadas. Notice that it's matching with las dificultades. Let's try to translate this back into Spanish now. Again, go slowly, think it out step by step. Don't rush it. We have, I told her, le dije que tengo cosas más importantes en las que pensar hoy, que simplemente no puedo permitirme perder más tiempo. Le pregunté si podía pedirle a Juan si podría venir a mi departamento más tarde, porque tengo un regalo para darle. Se me ocurrió que hay momentos en los que es necesario ser amable con aquellos que te han ayudado durante el año, y él era muy bueno conmigo cuando necesitaba ayuda. Tenía que afrontar muchas dificultades inesperadas. In text number 6, we have hasta entonces estaba seguro de que había un montón de cosas que eran inútiles en el mundo. Here we're talking as a man from a male perspective. You can see this because we're using seguro. However, if you are a female watching this, feel free to change this into segura. So we have up to now, or up until now, hasta entonces. Estaba seguro de que. So I was sure that. And then there was, había un montón de cosas. There was a lot of things, a mountain of things. You hear this word a lot, un montón de cosas, que eran inútiles en el mundo. Inútiles, notice the pronunciation here with the accent. This is how you say pointless in the world. Eran, this is plural because we have a mountain of things that they were pointless or useless. Another word for it, right? If this were singular and we were just saying it's pointless or it's useless, then it would be es inútil. So you wouldn't have the inútiles. Next we have my psychologist, and the pronunciation of this is very nice in Spanish. It's mi psicóloga. Obviously the spelling looks very intimidating, but it's a very simple sound. You have sip and then cóloga. This bit here, sip, like that, psicóloga, mi psicóloga. Dice que lo importante es no estar agobiado por la gente. So my psychologist says that the important thing, in Spanish they would say simply lo importante, the important. They wouldn't worry about putting thing. So this is another nice phrase. Dice que lo importante es no estar agobiado. The verb agobiar is to be overwhelmed. So here we have to not be overwhelmed. no está agobiado. And then why? What's the reason to not be overwhelmed? Por la gente. Here we have the use of por. Then in the next phrase, we have y probar de todo al menos una vez. So we have numerous words or verbs meaning to try. Now, when you are tasting food or trying experiences in life, the verb to try changes to probar, and the phrase to try everything is probar de todo. And then we have at least once, al menos una vez. In the second half, we have disfruto. So I enjoy nuestras charlas juntos. Charlas is like our chats. So we have I enjoy our chats together. Disfruto nuestras charlas juntos. Followed by quiere que salga más. Now you could also say ella if you wanted to be clear. She wants me to go out more. Notice that we have the trigger here. Ella quiere que followed by salga. The verb salir in the subjunctive. Pero no me suena bien. It sounds wrong to me. Okay, no me suena bien. I actually hear that a lot when I try to say certain things I'm not sure of in Spanish, and my friend will say, no me suena bien. It doesn't sound right to my ears what you just said. So we have quiere que salga más, pero no me suena bien hacerlo en esta etapa. It doesn't sound right to me to do it at this stage. You could also say in este momento, at this moment. Todo esto me pasó en un día en el que me sentía deprimido. Here again is another sign that we're speaking from a male perspective because we have deprimido instead of deprimida. So we have all of this. Todo esto me pasó, happened to me on a day or in a day, en un día, en el que. Here you can see that same piece of glue cropping up again and again. All this happened to me on a day in which. And it's en el que now because we're referring to el día. Me sentía deprimido. I was feeling down. Now, in Spanish they would say I was feeling depressed. Me sentía deprimido. Esta es la razón por la que no quiero continuar con mi terapia. Here again you see the glue cropping up. So this is the reason. Esta es la razón. The reason is la razón. For which? Because it's la razón, now it changes to por la que. No quiero continuar. I don't want to continue with my therapy. Therapy in Spanish is terapia. You could also use the verb seguir. I don't want to keep on with my therapy. So either continuar or seguir con mi terapia. Let's see how well we can translate this now. We have hasta entonces estaba seguro o segura de que había un montón de cosas que eran inútiles en el mundo. Mi psicóloga dice que lo importante es no estar agobiado por la gente y probar de todo al menos una vez. Disfruto nuestras charlas juntos. Quiere que salga más, pero no me suena bien hacerlo en esta etapa. Todo esto me pasó en un día cuando me sentía deprimido o deprimida. Esto es la razón por la que no quiero continuar con mi terapia. In text number 7, we have me preocupa que el agua ha estado corriendo por tanto tiempo. So it worries me preocupa. Then we have el agua and has been running. Ha estado corriendo for a long time por tanto tiempo. Here we have the same structure again. He estado intentando. So I have been trying to. He estado intentando repararlo. I've been trying to fix it. Pero no se apaga, but it doesn't turn off. Necesito cambiar una pieza que está rota. Notice that in English we would say, I need to change a part. So, or you could say also a piece, but I think it's more common to say I need to change a part. And you might be tempted to use parte, but in Spanish it's una pieza, a piece. That is broken, que está rota, pero el problema es que el espacio para trabajar en el baño es muy chico y incómodo. So uncomfortable, incómodo. Notice the accent there. It's important to stress that part, incómodo. The interesting thing here is that if we look at the English, it says the problem is that the space to work, and here it really feels like you might put in the problem is that the space in which to work. But it doesn't sound quite right. There's quite a delicate thing here in Spanish which we need to go through in the module we will do covering the word which. The correct word here is actually para. So it's saying that the problem is that the space in order to work in the bathroom. Now that's tricky. It's very easy to get that wrong. So just be careful at that part in the translation. Then it finishes with es difícil de alcanzar. So it's difficult to reach. Alcanzar is the verb to reach. Notice we have the preposition of de as well. So es difícil de alcanzar. In the second paragraph, we have traté de convencer a mi esposa. Here we have the personal a, and convencer is the verb to convince. So convince her, convince my wife de que. So traté de convencer a mi esposa de que deberíamos llamar a un plomero. Here we have again the personal a, that we should call a plumber. Pero se niega, she refuses. Notice how this is reflexive in Spanish. To refuse something is negarse. So we have pero se niega. She refuses herself. Me imagino. This word here is I imagine, but split up, you hear it as me imagino, but really in everyday Spanish, what you actually hear is me imagino. They cut out this bit here, me imagino, que porque no quiere gastar dinero, that it's because she doesn't want to spend money. Dice que tengo que repararlo yo mismo. She says that I have to fix it myself. Now this next bit, entonces en lugar de pelear. In the English, what we have here is so rather than, this phrase here. So rather than fight with her. In Spanish, that gets translated as entonces en lugar de pelear, in place of fighting with her. That's how you would say instead of fighting with her. So en lugar de pelear con ella, acordé hacerlo. I agreed to do it. Acordar is the verb to agree. Sé que no es correcto, pero trato de complacerla tanto como puedo. Tanto como puedo is as much as I can. So that's a nice piece of glue. Tanto como puedo. And we have a little bit of difference there between the English, because it says, I agreed to do it. I know it's wrong, but whenever I can, I try to please her. So it's just a rearrangement there, with the Spanish saying, I know that it's not correct, but I try to please her as much as I can. Pero trato de complacerla tanto como puedo. Para ser honesto, ni siquiera sé dónde empezar. Ni siquiera is very useful. It's like, I don't even. So here we have the word even. You might be tempted to go into incluso, because this has been covered before. But whenever it's I don't even in the negative, that phrase, I don't even, this is always ni siquiera in Spanish. So to be honest, I don't even know where to begin. Para ser honesto, ni siquiera sé dónde empezar. Los problemas con el agua siempre me asustan. Or you could say siempre me dan miedo, either way. So we have, again, look at these definite articles. In English, we would simply say problems with water always scare me. But in Spanish, the problems with the water always scare me. So, los problemas con el agua siempre me asustan. Voy a llamar a mi amigo, personal a here, Miguel, para ver si puede ayudarme. So that sentence is pretty straightforward. Then finally we have espero que me responda rápido. Here we have trigger for the subjunctive, right? Espero que. Now the verb is responder, but it switches sides. So he responds responda rápido. It's quite a long paragraph there with a lot of glue and vocabulary to take from it. Let's see how well we do now with the translation. Me preocupa que el agua ha estado corriendo por tanto tiempo. He estado intentando repararlo, pero no se apaga. Necesito cambiar una pieza que está rota, pero el problema es que el espacio para trabajar en el baño es muy chico y incómodo. Es difícil de alcanzar. Traté de convencer a mi esposa de que deberíamos llamar a un plomero, pero se niega. Me imagino que es porque no quiere gastar dinero. Dice que tengo que repararlo yo mismo y entonces, en lugar de pelear con ella, acordé hacerlo. Sé que no es correcto, pero trato de complacerla tanto como puedo. Para ser honesto, ni siquiera sé dónde empezar. Los problemas con el agua siempre me asustan. Voy a llamar a mi amigo Miguel para ver si puede ayudarme. Espero que me responda rápido. Here's text number 8 for you. Este libro me mostró que sé muy poco sobre el tema del dinero. So this book showed me or demonstrated to me. We have the verb mostrar, so it showed me, me mostró, que sé muy poco, that I know very little, sobre el tema, about the topic or about the subject or about the theme of money, del dinero. Notice that we would have de el dinero, but it gets contracted to del dinero. La mayoría de nosotros, most of us or the majority of us, tratamos de ocultar nuestro nivel de deuda. So we try to hide, ocultar, our level, which is el nivel, it's a masculine word, our level of debt. The word for debt is deuda. Pero el escritor te obliga, or you could also say te forza, a afrontar la realidad. But the writer is el escritor, obliges you or forces you to face, afrontar, notice we have the little a coming before it there, reality. And where in English we would just say to face reality, here we have the definite article again in Spanish, literally saying obliges you to face the reality, la realidad. In the next paragraph, the English says, my bank talks to me. And this would sound a bit silly in Spanish. They wouldn't understand, well, how can a building talk to you? So instead, they would put it as, en mi banco me hablan como si fuera un idiota. So in my bank, they speak to me or they talk to me as if I were como si fuera un idiota. Y tratan de ocultar, here we have our verb again, they try to hide the fact that, el hecho de que, the fact that, realmente mi dinero no está creciendo para mí en mi cuenta, that in reality or really, my money isn't growing. Crecer is the verb to grow, so no está creciendo for me in my account. Mi cuenta is my account. Pero ahora lo sé mejor. Notice in English we would simply say, but now I know better. Whereas in Spanish it sounds more natural to say, but now I know it better. So just watch out for that. Pero ahora lo sé mejor. Then in the last sentence we have quiero tomar control de mi destino financiero. So of my financial destiny. Financiero is financial. Y tomar decisiones. We could also say in English to take decisions, to make decisions, but in Spanish it's more natural to take decisions. So tomar decisiones que van a tener un impacto duradero, a lasting impact. The word for lasting in Spanish is duradero. Then on my life, en mi vida, especialmente en el retiro. This is retirement, the word for retirement. Notice that Spanish again uses the definite article, whereas in English we say especially in retirement. Spanish will say especially in the retirement. Let's try to translate this now. We have este libro me mostró que sé muy poco sobre el tema del dinero. La mayoría de nosotros tratamos de ocultar nuestro nivel de deuda, pero el escritor te obliga a afrontar la realidad. En mi banco me hablan como si fuera una idiota y trata de ocultar el hecho de que mi dinero no está creciendo para mí en mi cuenta, pero ahora lo sé mejor. Quiero tomar control de mi destino financiero y tomar decisiones que van a tener un impacto duradero en mi vida, especialmente en el retiro. Let's go through text number 9. Esta noche estamos decorando el árbol de Navidad. So tonight we are decorating. Decorar is the verb to decorate. And this means that we're right now in the process of decorating. Estamos decorando el árbol de Navidad, the Christmas tree. Y tenemos prisa por terminarlo. This lo is referring to finishing el árbol, a masculine word. And we're in a hurry is tenemos prisa. Notice the use of the word por here, because this is explaining why we're in a hurry. Tenemos prisa por terminarlo. We're in a hurry because, well, we want to get it done. We want to get it finished. Then we have a trigger for the subjunctive. Antes de que el resto de la familia, the rest of the family. Notice that there's no verb here. It waits until the very end. Now we hit the verb, which goes into the subjunctive. They arrive, or it arrives, because it's la familia. So, antes de que el resto de la familia llegue. Es una sorpresa para ellos. So, a surprise, una sorpresa. In English, we have I like putting decorations up. So, the verb in Spanish is really to put up, which is colocar. So, me gusta colocar las decoraciones. I like to put up the decorations. Pongo cada una con cuidado. So, let's highlight vocabulary here and this verb here as well, to put up, colocar. Now it says pongo cada una. So we're referring to las decoraciones, right? Feminine word. So I put each one, cada una, con cuidado. This is how you would say carefully, with care, con cuidado. Para asegurarme de que el árbol se ve lo mejor posible. In English we have to make sure. And the verb in Spanish is asegurar, but it's used reflexively, asegurarse. So this is literally saying, in order to assure myself that the tree looks as good as possible, lo mejor posible. This is a really nice phrase here for as good as possible, lo mejor, or the best possible, lo mejor posible. And se ve, or se ve, you hear all the time for it looks. It's very useful, that se ve. Let's highlight this as well. Asegurarme de que. Then we have lo mejor posible. Las luces son especialmente importantes. So the lights are especially important. Y trato de no poner una encima de la otra. This is important because we're referring to las luces, right? A feminine word. So I try not to put una on top of, encima de la otra. Una encima de la otra. Literally one on top of the other. All feminine. Una, la, because we're referring to las luces. This is why keeping in mind your nouns and whether they're feminine or masculine are very important, because later on, even at the very end of sentences, it matters that you remember what the noun was that you're referring to and whether it's masculine or feminine. Encima, by the way, is not being placed, it doesn't have a masculine or feminine slant. It's always encima, regardless of the noun. Then in the last sentence, we have another example of this. Hay ciertas épocas del año en las que es bueno estar con la familia, y esta es una de ellas. Okay, so there are certain times. Hay ciertas épocas. Épocas would be times or periods of the year del año, and certain would be ciertas, matching with épocas, right, being a feminine word, del año. Now we have in which and las que. You see again and again the same lessons repeating themselves, which is what I was explaining to you in the introduction. So here we're referring to las épocas, the times, and here we have in which with las in the middle. Es bueno estar con la familia. In English we'd say it's good to be around, but in Spanish it's easier to simply say it's good to be with familia. Again, using the definite article, la familia. Y esta es una de ellas. Look at this. One of those. So this again is referring back to épocas. So this is one of those, una de ellas, referring to épocas, one of those times. You have to be quite careful in these last two, well, this last half of the sentence here and this one here, because there's a lot of words at the end of the sentence that are referring to nouns that happened up front. Let's try our best to translate this now. So we have, esta noche estamos decorando el árbol de Navidad y tenemos prisa por terminarlo antes de que el resto de la familia llegue. Es una sorpresa para ellos. Me gusta colocar las decoraciones. Pongo cada una con cuidado para asegurarme que el árbol se ve lo mejor posible. Las luces son especialmente importantes y trato de no poner una encima de la otra. Hay ciertas épocas del año en las que es bueno estar con la familia, y esta es una de ellas. In text number 10, we have mi hermana es realmente un fastidio. Un fastidio means a nuisance. And notice how it appears masculine, un fastidio, even though we're referring to my sister. Now, this never changes. It's always un fastidio, even if you're talking about a female. So it never becomes una fastidia, for example. It continues then with es la más lista de la clase. Normally, we're used to the word listo or lista, meaning ready, but it also carries the meaning of being clever in Spanish. So she is the most clever, meaning the smartest in the class. And notice In English, you would say in the class, but in Spanish, it's of the class. So, es la más lista de la clase. Y siempre tiene una respuesta para todo. She always has an answer for everything. So, una respuesta. You can also see the word sometimes instead of respuesta, you'll see contestación. But I think respuesta is easier. Then we have no importa el asunto, regardless of the subject. El asunto is the subject. In English, we would say no matter the subject. And in Spanish, you'll hear very often no importa, it doesn't matter, meaning regardless of the subject. Si tratas de darle un consejo. So if you try to give to her an advice, un consejo, inmediatamente está en desacuerdo contigo. Notice the word for immediately. In English, we have this double M, whereas in Spanish it's I-N-M, so it's inmediatamente. Slight little difference in the pronunciation there. Then we have she disagrees with you, so está en desacuerdo. She is in disagreement contigo with you. If we look at the next paragraph in English, we have the word since here. But we could also say as she's younger than me. And this is what they do in Spanish. Como es más joven o más joven que yo, quiere seguirme a todos lados a donde voy. Now there's a few things here. So as she's younger or younger than me, más joven que yo, she wants to follow me everywhere. So everywhere in Spanish would be a todos lados, to all sides, a todos lados. Now in English, we would say everywhere I go. So literally it would be a todos lados, que voy, that I go. But in Spanish, you see to where I go. This is how it would sound most natural. So we could take this phrase as a whole actually. A todos lados, a donde voy. Everywhere I go. And literally in Spanish would be to all sides, to where I go. So it's much more complicated. A todos lados, a donde voy. You could also put vaya, use this subjunctive there, to everywhere I might go. This is an example of nothing triggering the subjunctive, but we can just use it on its own. Either way would sound correct. Then in English, we have the word which is lo cual es in Spanish. Lo cual es muy fastidioso, which is very annoying. Además, cuando discutimos, mis padres están siempre de su lado. So, furthermore, or in addition to that, además, when we argue, cuando discutimos, so discutir is the verb to argue. And so we have discutimos for we argue. Mis padres están siempre de su lado. This means on her side in theory. If it was a su lado instead of de su lado, it would mean that they were literally by her side, a su lado, that they were standing there by her side. But de su lado means that in theory, they are on her side whenever we argue. So you can see a very delicate little change there. Finally, we have sueño con el tiempo cuando pueda ser libre. So I dream with the time. Here's a little thing where in the intro I was talking about how these little things catch you out, because in English we say I dream of a time, whereas in Spanish it's I dream with the time. Sueño con el tiempo. Now we have the word cuando triggering the subjunctive, because this is not describing a habitual regular action, right? So cuando pueda, when I might be free, ser libre. As you can see, even though this is a short little paragraph, there's a lot in here that can catch you out. Let's see how we go with our translation now. Mi hermana es realmente un fastidio. Es la más lista de la clase y siempre tiene una respuesta para todo. no importa el asunto. Si tratas de darle un consejo, inmediatamente está en desacuerdo contigo. Como es más joven que yo, quiere seguirme a todos lados a donde voy, lo cual es muy fastidioso. Además, mis padres siempre están de su lado cuando discutimos. Sueño con el tiempo cuando pueda ser libre.